They never give you a warning when this happens. There is no announcement, no dramatic scene where everything suddenly becomes clear. One day you simply notice that something essential has shifted, and the ground beneath what once felt secure is no longer holding the same weight. Most people believe that when God steps in, he does it loudly, visibly, with confrontation and exposure. But there's a deeper, more unsettling reality that few are prepared to face. Sometimes God does not confront wrongdoing at all. Sometimes he simply steps away. And when restraint is lifted, what follows is not chaos. It is consequence. If you were removed from a relationship without explanation, without closure, without the justice you believed you deserved, you need to understand this clearly. Your removal was not rejection. It was not abandonment. It was authorization. Authorization for truth to finally operate without interference. Authorization for reality to respond without being softened by your presence. And that is where this message truly begins. God did not remove you because you failed. He removed you because you stayed beyond the point where staying was still aligned with truth. Many people torment themselves with one question after an ending like this. What did I do wrong? It feels like an honest question, but most of the time it is the wrong one. Not every ending comes from a mistake. Some endings happen because a role has been completed. Endurance is often praised, but endurance without discernment slowly turns into misalignment. There is a difference between faithfulness and prolonged exposure to distortion. When love continues past its purpose, it stops correcting what is wrong and starts covering it. And when covering replaces correction, separation becomes unavoidable. God does not remove people impulsively or emotionally. He removes them precisely when their continued presence no longer produces growth but delay. You were not taken out because you were weak. You were taken out because remaining any longer would have interfered with the next phase of accountability. To understand why your absence was necessary, you have to understand the role you were unknowingly playing. You were never meant to be the destination, you are covering. Most people misunderstand why certain relationships lasted as long as they did. They assume length equals approval. They believe time validates behavior. They confuse endurance with endorsement. That assumption is dangerous. You were not placed in that person's life to shield them from the consequences of their actions. You were not assigned to absorb what they refused to face. And yet, over time, that is exactly what happened. Your presence softened the impact of their choices. Your patience delayed the natural responses their behavior should have triggered. Your steadiness created the illusion of stability around someone who was fundamentally unstable. Without realizing it, you became a buffer, a covering. And a covering is not a reward. It is not permanent. It is a temporary function, meant to protect what still has the capacity to be corrected. The problem begins when a covering remains after correction has been rejected, when manipulation is met with tolerance instead of resistance, when distortion is met with explanation instead of consequence, when harm is met with compassion that asks nothing in return. At that point, the covering no longer protects growth. It blocks accountability. This is the line many people cross without realizing it. You believed you were preserving peace, but in reality, you were postponing reckoning. The narcissistic pattern did not change because there was no urgency to change. Your presence absorbed the discomfort that should have forced self-examination. As long as you remained steady, they were free to remain unchanged. This is why your role was never meant to last forever. A covering is designed to be lifted once its purpose is complete. If it is not lifted, it becomes a hiding place. And God does not allow hiding places to exist indefinitely. What felt like loyalty slowly became interference. Not because your intentions were wrong, but because your endurance began to suppress truth. There comes a moment when patience no longer demonstrates strength. It begins to signal permission. Permission for patterns to deepen. Permission for distortion to normalize. Permission for harm to continue without challenge. Many people believe staying longer proves love. They believe absorbing more pain proves faithfulness. They believe holding everything together proves moral strength. But morality is not measured by how much injustice a person can endure. It is measured by whether truth is allowed to function. You were never meant to be the place where destructive behavior found rest. You were meant to be a passage, a temporary bridge. And when that bridge remained open too long, God intervened, not to punish you, but to restore order. Your removal did not randomly strip them of comfort. It removed a shield that had outlived its purpose. And once that shield was gone, something inevitable began to happen. Because while a covering remains, the one beneath it can never fully feel the weight of what they create. The narcissist could not feel consequences while you were there. As long as you stayed, consequences were muted, not erased. Muted. Every time harm occurred, you absorbed the shock. Every time reality attempted to correct behavior, you softened the impact. Every time accountability tried to arrive, your restraint delayed it. This is the part that is hardest to accept. They did not avoid consequence because they were clever. They avoided consequence because someone else was carrying it. You were not just enduring discomfort, you were intercepting reality. Your emotional regulation compensated for their instability. Your moral clarity compensated for their distortion. Your willingness to reflect compensated for their refusal to self-examine. And because of that, the environment remained artificially stable. Artificial stability is dangerous. It looks like peace, but it prevents transformation. It creates the illusion that actions have no cost. When consequences are delayed, they do not disappear, they accumulate. And as long as the weight never reached them, insight had no urgency. Without urgency, reflection never happened. And without reflection, nothing changed. This was not a failure of love. It was the limitation of shielding. Shielding can protect for a season, but it cannot reform what refuses accountability. Over time, your presence became a buffer between behavior and outcome. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but consistently. And consistency matters because the longer consequences are delayed, the more intense they must become when they finally arrive. This is why removal becomes necessary. Not to create pain, but to restore sensation. Not to cause harm, but to reconnect actions with outcomes. God does not need dramatic intervention when structure already exists. He simply removes what has been interrupting it. When you were removed, cause and effect were reunited. For the first time, behavior no longer disappeared into your endurance. For the first time, manipulation was not met with explanation. For the first time, distortion was not softened by compassion. And that is when sensation began. Not emotional awareness, not remorse. Sensation, the kind that forces confrontation with reality. This is an uncomfortable truth, but it is a necessary one. Mercy without consequence does not heal, it delays reckoning, and delay extended beyond its purpose becomes injustice. If you ever wondered why nothing changed no matter how much you gave, consider this carefully. What you were providing was relief, not correction. Relief soothes. Correction teaches. And teaching cannot occur when sensation is blocked. God removed you so consequences could finally speak. There comes a moment when restraint no longer serves its function, not because restraint was wrong, but because its season has ended. God does not rush this moment. He allows patterns to fully reveal themselves. He gives space for recognition. But when recognition never comes and avoidance becomes habitual, restraint turns into interference. At that point, God does not escalate. He withdraws. Your removal was not aggression. It was alignment. Alignment between action and outcome. Alignment between truth and experience. As long as you remained, consequences struggled to find their voice. Once you were gone, they no longer needed permission. This was not dramatic justice. It was functional justice. God did not need to expose anyone publicly. He did not need to shame or humiliate. He simply allowed reality to resume its role. When the covering is lifted, behavior becomes audible. What was once hidden behind stability now stands alone. What was once excused by compassion now carries its own weight. What was once diffused through your endurance now arrives undiluted. Many people mistake this for abandonment. They think silence means indifference. They assume distance means disengagement. In truth, distance is often the clearest form of engagement God uses. By stepping back, He allows truth to step forward. Consequences do not argue. They do not explain, they arrive. And when they arrive without restraint, they teach what words never could. The narcissist does not gain insight through confrontation. Insight comes when outcomes can no longer be avoided. This is why nothing changed while you stayed and why everything began shifting once you left. Not because you controlled the situation, but because your presence regulated it. God removed you because regulation was no longer appropriate. Correction was required. This does not mean destruction was the goal. It means clarity became unavoidable. When restraint is removed, systems reveal their true condition. Stability shows whether it was genuine or borrowed. Peace reveals whether it was internal or dependent. Borrowed peace cannot survive separation. God does not remove the righteous to punish the unrighteous. He removes the righteous to restore order. And order is not cruel, it is necessary. Once consequences were allowed to operate, they did not arrive as a single event. They arrived as a condition. Divine justice rarely appears as spectacle. It appears as immersion. The emotional environment they once exported became the atmosphere they now had to live in. What you carried quietly became their daily weight. What you absorbed privately became their constant pressure. Confusion was no longer something they caused. It became something they lived inside. This was not punishment, it was placement. They were placed inside the reality they built without mediation. While you were present, their inner disorder had an external regulator. Once you were gone, that disorder had to sustain itself, and it could not. Sleep became inconsistent. Relationships felt strained. Conversations felt tense, not because of opposition, but because harmony had never been internalized. They encountered something unfamiliar, the inability to offload discomfort. This is where people look for remorse and miss the point. Justice does not begin with repentance, it begins with awareness. And awareness comes from sustained exposure. Living inside one's own patterns forces recognition. The same outcomes, the same breakdowns, the same repetition teaches what explanation never could. This is the weight you carried consistently. And now, without your presence, the weight remained. When living inside that reality became unbearable, the search for replacement began. But what replaced you did not carry restraint. It did not regulate chaos. It did not absorb disorder because it was not sent to cover. It was allowed to expose. God does not replace a covering with another covering when the season of covering has ended. He allows contrast. Where you responded with patience, the new environment responded with resistance. Where you brought stability, it brought unpredictability. Where you absorbed tension, it returned it unchanged. This was not cruelty, it was accuracy. The narcissist discovered that the world no longer adjusted to them. They had to adjust to it, and they were not equipped to do so. What once felt manageable now felt hostile. What once felt controlled now felt unstable. Not because you were irreplaceable as a person, but because the function you served was never meant to be permanent. Comparison followed, not rooted in love, but in function. They noticed what was missing, not affection, containment. But realization did not lead to humility, it led to discomfort. Because acknowledging restraint also meant acknowledging the abuse of it. The absence of mercy did not destroy them, it revealed them. It revealed dependence on external regulation. It revealed the lack of internal structure. Cement failed because imbalance could no longer exist without collapse. And while their world grew sharper, something different happened within you. Healing did not begin when they suffered. Healing began when you refused to cover again. You do not heal by understanding dysfunction. You heal by withdrawing the function that made dysfunction sustainable. As long as you monitor outcomes, explain behavior, or wonder if they feel it now, you remain positioned as a regulator. True separation is not distance. It is refusal. Refusal to translate chaos. Refusal to mediate consequences. Refusal to carry what is no longer yours. Disengagement is not cruelty, it is clarity. Forgiveness is not re-entry, it is release without return. Boundaries are not arguments, they are positions. And positions once taken restore order. You were strong enough to stay. But staying would have required betraying truth. Endurance tolerates, maturity discerns, and this is why God removed you. Not to punish anyone, but because your next season requires boundaries. The season of endurance ended. The season of wisdom began. And wisdom knows when to step aside so truth can finally stand on its own. When truth is finally allowed to stand on its own, something subtle but irreversible begins to happen inside you. At first, it does not feel like relief. It feels like unfamiliar space. Space where noise used to live. Space where vigilance once existed. Space where your nervous system no longer has a constant because your body assignment. Because your body was trained for tension, peace can feel confusing before it feels safe. You may notice yourself waiting for something to go wrong, not because it will, but because for so long, calm was only the pause between disruptions. Your system learned to associate quiet with anticipation. God does not rush you through this adjustment. He does not demand instant calm. He allows your internal rhythms to reset gradually, honestly, without shame. This is where many people make a critical mistake. They interpret the discomfort of peace as proof they made the wrong decision. They confuse unfamiliar calm with emptiness. But emptiness is absence of meaning. What you are experiencing is absence of distortion. As days pass, something changes in how your body responds to life. You stop bracing. Your shoulders lower without effort. Your thoughts stop rehearsing conversations that will never happen. You realize how much energy was spent on emotional regulation that was never returned. This realization can bring grief. Not dramatic grief, but quiet mourning for how much of yourself was required just to keep things functioning. This grief is not regret. It is recognition. Recognition of cost. And with recognition comes clarity. You begin to see moments from the past differently. Conversations that once felt confusing now reveal their pattern. You recognize how often you were asked to explain what should have been obvious, how often accountability was reframed as atta, how consistently your empathy was used as leverage. This awareness does not arrive with rage, it arrives with precision. You are no longer trying to understand the narcissist, you are understanding yourself. And this shift is profound. It marks the moment you stop orienting your life around someone else's distortion. Your tolerance changes, not because you grow cold, but because you grow accurate. Behaviors you once rationalized now register immediately, not with anxiety, but with discernment. Your body recognizes incongruence before your mind tries to excuse it. This is not hypervigilance. Hypervigilance scans for threat. Discernment recognizes pattern. Spiritually, something deep stabilizes. You stop interpreting God only through suffering. You no longer assume pain equals purpose. You begin to see that God is just as present in peace as he is in trial. This corrects a long-held distortion. God was never honored by your depletion. Prayer changes in this season. It becomes quieter, simpler, less performative. You stop pleading for outcomes and start asking for alignment. You stop negotiating and start trusting order. There is less urgency because there is less fear. You are no longer praying to survive. You are praying to live well. Anger may surface at times, not explosive anger, but clear awareness of injustice. You realize how often spiritual language was used to keep you compliant, how endurance was praised while wisdom was dismissed, how forgiveness was demand.
D without repentance.
This anger is not meant to be buried. It is meant to be integrated. As you integrate, relationships around you begin to shift. Some deepen naturally, others fade quietly. This is not loss, it is alignment. You no longer bond through shared struggle. You bond through shared reality. You stop over-explaining yourself. People who respect truth do not require justification. You may grieve connections that cannot follow you. Not because they are cruel, but because they are comfortable with imbalance. This grief is real, and it teaches you something important. Outgrowing an environment is not betrayal, it is obedience. You begin to feel gratitude that surprises you. Gratitude for calm mornings, for decisions made without dread, for laughter that does not cost you dignity, for faith that does not require you to shrink. This gratitude is not loud, it is steady, it anchors you. Meanwhile, the narcissist continues living within the limits of their internal structure. You may hear fragments of information indirectly, stories that sound polished, stories that sound chaotic. None of them pull you back. You understand now that their journey is not yours to manage. Justice is no longer something you monitor. You trust order. This trust is not naive, it is earned. You have seen what happens when God removes restraint. You have watched systems collapse without confrontation. You now know that truth does not need your defense. It needs your absence. One of the deeps. T shifts in this season is your relationship with silence. Silence no longer feels threatening. It feels open. You are not waiting for emotional demands. You are not reading quiet as punishment. You are simply present. And presence becomes fertile ground. Creativity returns. Curiosity awakens. Interests you once abandoned resurface, not because you suddenly have more time, but because you have more capacity. Survival no longer consumes your energy. You rediscover parts of yourself that were dormant, not gone. This is restoration, not reinvention. Your identity stabilizes. You stop defining yourself by how much you can endure. You define yourself by what you honor. Your values sharpen. Mutuality, integrity, peace, truth. You stop negotiating these in the name of love. Love without these is not love. There are moments when questions arise. Why did it take so long? Why were the warnings not clearer earlier? These questions come from reflection, not bitterness. And slowly, an answer forms. You were not late, you were being prepared. The clarity you have now required contrast, not because God needed it, but because you did. You can now recognize dysfunction without becoming entangled in it. You see manipulation without confronting it. You see distortion without correcting it. You understand that not every truth requires your participation. This is maturity, quiet, grounded strength. Your faith becomes less performative and more embodied. You stop needing validation for discernment. You trust what you know because you have tested it. You have lived the cost of ignoring truth. You have tasted the fruit of obedience. Appearances no longer sway you. Patience changes form. It is no longer patience that tolerates harm. It is patience that allows growth to unfold naturally. You do not rush healing. You do not force forgiveness. You allow integration to happen honestly. Over time, the relationship that once dominated your emotional world becomes properly scaled, not erased but contextualized. It no longer defines you, it informs you. Trauma repeats. Wisdom remembers without reliving. Eventually, you reach a place where the narcissist occupies no emotional space at all. Not because you tried to forget, but because there is nothing left to process. Lessons learned, patterns understood, attachment released, closure without conversation, completion without agreement. You understand now that God's removal was not punishment, it was protection. Protection of your mind, your faith, your future. God did not wait until you broke completely. He intervened when endurance threatened to become identity. Standing on the other side, you carry discernment without cynicism, compassion without self-betrayal, faith without illusion. You are not hardened, you are clarified. This clarity becomes testimony without words. You choose peace consistently. You do not chase chaos. You no longer confuse intensity with intimacy. You no longer confuse sacrifice with love. If someone new enters your life, they do not inherit your wounds. They meet your boundaries, they encounter your wholeness. You do not audition for connection. You allow it to grow where truth is mutual. This is the final fruit of the process. Not vindication, not explanation, wholeness. God did not remove the narcissist to teach them a lesson. He removed them to return your life to you. And once life is returned, stewardship begins. With wisdom, with restraint, with gratitude. You move forward not as someone who survived something terrible, but as someone who learned to honor truth at great cost. That cost was not wasted. It produced discernment that will guard you, faith that will not fracture, peace that does not depend on anyone else's behavior. And that is how you know the work is complete. Not because the past no longer hurts, but because it no longer controls you. Truth stands. You remain free.